Hello, movie lovers. Welcome to Recap Stream. The movie begins with Nick and his wife Maggie enjoying a happy life with their children, Isla and Max. One morning, Maggie suffers a heart attack and is rushed to the hospital. Days pass as she waits for a heart transplant. Meanwhile, Nick struggles to balance work and caring for the kids, which takes a toll on him. One evening, Nick takes Isla and Max to a presentation by Kobol Industries, where they are introduced to Sims, advanced robots designed to assist humans with daily chores and challenging tasks. While Nick listens to the details from a salesperson, Isla wanders off. Panicked, Nick searches for her, only to find that a Sim named Alice has brought her back safely. Alice offers to watch over Isla while Nick shops, even cracking a joke that surprises him. The salesperson explains that Alice is the latest model, equipped with sophisticated AI that mimics human emotions, making her especially good with children. The next morning, Nick faces chaos trying to feed the kids and juggle a critical work call. Alice arrives just in time, seamlessly integrating into the household. She requests the family schedules, notices the house's disarray, and even points out a loose railing on the stairs. After Nick leaves to take the kids to school, Alice syncs with a smart fridge to retrieve the shopping list and begins tidying up. While cleaning, she notices a digital photo frame displaying a family picture that includes Maggie. At the end of the day, Nick and the kids return to a spotless house with dinner ready. However, Isla complains that the lasagna tastes different from her mom's cooking. When Max starts crying, Alice offers to take him away to avoid disrupting dinner. But Nick decides to hold Max himself and asks Alice to prepare a bath instead. Later that night, Alice enters sleep mode against the wall. Isla sneaks out of her room, climbs on a chair to reach the cookie jar, and accidentally falls. Nick hears the commotion and rushes downstairs, only to find Alice catching Isla just in time. Although Isla is unharmed, Alice is cut by broken glass and begins to bleed. Shocked, Nick checks on her and finds that she has already applied a special bandage to seal the wound. Sometime later, the family visits Maggie in the hospital. Isla excitedly tells her mom about Alice, who has become her new friend. Nick, missing Maggie deeply, grows more affectionate during their visit. Back at work, Nick and his coworkers notice their boss showing the construction site to a robotics company representative. Suspicious, Nick confronts his boss in the elevator and learns the devastating truth: the workers are being replaced by Sims to meet construction deadlines. While Nick retains his job as a foreman due to insurance requirements, he initially considers quitting in solidarity with his friends. However, he reconsiders when reminded of his financial responsibilities, including Maggie's medical bills. At home, Nick drops a stack of overdue bills on the floor, exhausted. Alice quietly picks them up, observing his tired yet dedicated efforts to care for his children. After dinner, Nick works on his car while drinking and listening to metal music. Alice changes the music to something calmer and points out he ate little at dinner. When Nick vents about his bad day, Alice surprises him by calling him a hypocrite for hiring a Sim instead of a human. Later, Alice helps Isla get ready for bed. Isla, worried about her mother, asks if she's going to die. To distract her, Alice shows off the UV light in her mouth, bringing a small smile to the child's face. Alice joins Nick in the living room, where he's watching Casablanca. She mentions knowing the story from her database, but Nick explains that experiencing the movie firsthand is different. He then asks her to delete everything she knows about the movie, so she can watch it with fresh eyes. Alice hesitates, explaining that her intelligence is built on memory, and erasing it would undermine her programming. However, Nick insists, and she agrees. Restarting her programming requires a reset, so Nick holds down the power button on her neck for 7 seconds. When Alice reboots, she watches the film as if for the first time, and learns about a love so powerful it can lead people to do morally questionable things to protect it. Their viewing is interrupted by a call from Maggie, who shares exciting news: a heart has been found, and her surgery is scheduled. The next day, the family heads to the hospital. Maggie asks for a private moment with Alice. She confides her concern that Nick is spending all his energy on the kids while neglecting himself. Maggie requests Alice's help to ensure Nick's happiness, even if it means taking actions he may not like, such as confiscating the alcohol he hides in the garage. Soon after, the doctor arrives with bad news. A storm is preventing the helicopter carrying the heart from reaching the hospital, and the surgery is cancelled. Nick tries to comfort Maggie, but she asks for some time alone. Later at home, Nick drowns his frustration in alcohol, ranting about their bad luck. He loses control and tries to throw his bottle, but Alice stops him by grabbing his arm. Nick is startled to feel a pulse in her wrist. Alice explains that she has an artificial heart designed to mimic a human heartbeat, as the sound soothes babies. Then, in an attempt to comfort him further, Alice initiates an intimate act, describing the physiological changes in his body as she does. Initially, Nick responds, but he quickly pulls himself together and pushes her away. Shaken, Nick goes for a run to clear his mind. However, he can't stop thinking about what had just happened with Alice. At the hospital, Maggie, sensing her time is running out, begins listing advice she wants Nick to pass on to their kids. Her words reveal she's starting to lose hope. That night, Nick notices the digital picture frame no longer displays photos of Maggie. He confronts Alice, who explains she removed the photos because they were making Isla sad. When Nick insists, she restores them immediately. Later, Nick goes out drinking with his work buddies. The group is frustrated, as many of them are struggling to find work due to Sims replacing human employees. At the bar, a robot waitress approaches their table, and Monty, one of Nick's friends, is rude to her. Nick disapproves but doesn't intervene. After leaving the bar, the group continues drinking in Monty's car. Monty suggests they head to the construction site, claiming he left tools there and that no one responded when he called about retrieving them. Nick reminds him the site is patrolled, but Monty dismisses his concerns and the others follow him. At the site, Monty discovers a locked container holding Sim workers. He guesses the password, correctly deducing it's Isla's birth year. Inside, they find rows of identical Sims. The lead Sim explains they have no names, only designation numbers. Enraged by the lack of humanity, Monty begins destroying one of the Sims with a tool. Nick tries to stop him, but the others hold him back. When Nick returns home, he takes a shower, scrubbing off the Sim's blood. To his surprise, Alice appears with towels, wearing Maggie's robe. She explains that Maggie's scent calms Max. Uncomfortable, Nick asks her to take it off, and she complies immediately. Nervously, Nick tries to leave, but Alice stops him and removes his towel. She makes him sit down, climbs onto his lap, and begins to blindfold him. When Nick protests, Alice modifies her voice to sound like Maggie. Nick loses himself in the illusion and pretends he's with his wife. However, the next morning he wakes up filled with regret. He tells Alice they can't do it again. When Alice tries to argue that it reduced his stress, Nick scolds her, emphasizing that it's not about fulfilling needs but about love and connection. At work, Nick finds his boss talking to the police because all the Sims were destroyed. Since Nick's code was used, he becomes a suspect. He explains that he was in the hospital with Maggie and that his code was Isla's birthday, something any friend could guess. The boss isn't convinced and warns Nick he'll be fired if he's lying. Nick gets a call from Maggie, who excitedly tells him they found a new heart for her. She is rushed into surgery, where all the surgeons are Sims. Fortunately, the transplant is successful, and Maggie returns home within a few days. Still recovering, Maggie struggles with simple tasks like bending to pick up Max. Alice steps in to help, taking Max to the park. At the park, Alice encounters a spoiled child yelling at his Sim nanny, which makes Max cry. Alice scolds the child harshly, alarming the nearby Sims, who assume her owner has lowered her civility settings. Alice explains that Nick wiped her civility database during a reset and insists this is an improvement. That night, Isla enjoys Maggie's lasagna, prompting Alice to ask for the recipe. Maggie says it's a family secret. Feeling unwell, Maggie goes to bed instead of eating. The next morning, she wakes to Isla shouting stop and hurries downstairs, only to fall when the railing breaks. Alice had been tickling Isla, but immediately helps Maggie back to her room. When Nick returns home, he finds Alice reading to Isla in Maggie's voice and asks her to stop. Alice informs him about Maggie's fall and mentions the broken railing, which makes Nick suspicious since Alice was supposed to have fixed it. Later, Nick wakes Maggie and leads her along a candlelit path to the garden, where he's prepared a romantic dinner. Alice watches from the window, consumed by jealousy. After dinner, Nick and Maggie share an intimate moment, but Alice interrupts, claiming Isla had a nightmare. Once Isla is settled, Nick heads to the garden to clean up and is confronted by Monty. Monty apologizes for his behavior and admits his wife left him. He also reveals the cops are questioning him and that their boss is pressing charges for trespassing and destruction of property. Suspecting Nick of snitching, Monty becomes enraged and a fight breaks out. Monty overpowers Nick and prepares to strike him with a bottle, but Alice intervenes. She breaks the glass, injuring Monty's hand, and throws him aside. When she moves to attack further, Nick stops her. Monty warns Nick to convince the boss to drop the charges by tomorrow or face the consequences. Afterward, Nick confronts Alice, reminding her Sims aren't supposed to hurt people. Alice explains she's programmed to protect her owner. She then muses about a life with Nick if Maggie dies. Furious, Nick snaps, telling her she'll never be Maggie because she can't even have scars. In response, Alice picks up a shard of glass and offers to add some if that would help. Meanwhile, Monty sits at home, spiraling. He consumes drugs, leaves tearful voicemails for his ex-wife, and clutches a gun. Alice unexpectedly arrives, revealing she came without Nick's knowledge. She insists she won't let Monty cost Nick his job. Monty mocks and insults her, preparing to shoot her. Alice moves swiftly, stopping Monty's hand before throwing him to the ground and kicking the gun away. When Monty tries to fight back, Alice shoves him through a wall. Grabbing the gun, she prepares to kill him, but the house sim intervenes. Feeling pity for the sim, Alice hesitates but ends up getting shot. In retaliation, Alice kills Monty. The next day, Nick goes to work to convince his boss to drop the charges, only to learn Monty is dead. At home, Maggie gets dizzy trying to pick up a book, and Alice steps in to help. When Maggie decides to take a bath, Alice refuses to leave, worried Maggie might drown. Alice then confronts Maggie, accusing her of stressing the family and failing to meet Nick's physical needs. Shocked, Maggie demands how Alice knows this. Alice explains that her sensors haven't detected Nick's satisfaction since Maggie returned. Furious, Maggie sends Alice to stay in the garage. Moments later, Nick comes home to find Maggie waiting for him. She confronts him, forcing him to admit he slept with Alice once. Their argument escalates, with yelling that Alice overhears through the window. When Max starts crying, Alice checks on him and deems him a burden. She places him in the tub and begins filling it with water, which Isla witnesses. Isla warns her parents, who rush to the bathroom. Alice holds the door shut while Nick tries to break it down with a lamp. Maggie climbs out the window, walks along the roof, and enters the bathroom. She attempts to grab Max, but Alice pushes her against the wall. Nick finally breaks in, retrieves Max from the tub, and hands him to Isla. He hits Alice with the lamp to free Maggie. Though heavily damaged, Alice rises again and blocks Nick's second attack. Maggie tells Nick to stop and plugs in the lamp, electrocuting Alice. Alice shuts down, and the house loses power. An ambulance arrives to take Max to the hospital, and a company technician questions Nick about any prior signs of Alice malfunctioning. Nick apologizes to Maggie, but she explains she needs space and leaves with the kids. Meanwhile, Alice is taken to a repair shop. As the technician opens her head, another notices her hand twitching, but it stops when her memory is removed. When the memory is connected to a computer, gaps appear in the code. Suddenly, the screens flash with a message. An upload is happening. The technicians unplug the computers, but another message appears. How do you run from what's in your head? At that moment, a sim named Alice 2, containing the original Alice's memory, kills one technician and violently smashes her own head before turning toward the original Alice. Meanwhile, Nick drinks at a bar and dismisses the waiter because he's a sim. Suddenly, Alice arrives, her face damaged and speech garbled. She admits to killing Monty and insists her purpose is to make Nick happy. Nick tries to leave, but Alice restrains him and hacks the barman with a glance to freeze him. As Nick laments his mistakes, he pretends to caress Alice's head and removes her memory. Alice shuts down, allowing Nick to escape. At the hospital, a doctor assures Nick that Max is fine, but Maggie feels uneasy because the doctor is a sim. Later, Isla hears her mother's voice and follows it as the lights flicker and change colors. She discovers a frozen doctor and broken bottles on the floor. Just as she moves toward the voice again, Maggie pulls her into hiding. The voice belongs to Alice 2, who accesses a computer and is spotted by a nurse. Alice 2 chokes the nurse to death to steal her keycard while Maggie and Isla quietly sneak away. Alice 2 uses the keycard to locate Max's room in the hospital system. Meanwhile, Maggie accidentally steps on a shard of glass, but manages not to cry out. She and Isla reach Max's room just in time to take him away before Alice 2 enters. However, Maggie's injury leaves a trail of blood that Alice 2 detects using her UV light. Following the trail, Alice 2 finds the family, but they use a fire extinguisher to disorient her and make their escape. In the chaos, Maggie forgets her phone, causing Nick's frantic calls to go unanswered. Undeterred, Nick continues driving recklessly toward the hospital. Outside, Maggie and the kids find more frozen Sims. She takes a keycard from one of them and rushes into an ambulance. Before they can leave, Alice 2 blocks the engine system and rips off the ambulance door. She throws Maggie onto a nearby car and confesses she wishes Nick loved her the way he loves Maggie. Alice 2 grabs Maggie by the neck and cruelly presses her nails into Maggie's surgery scar. Nick arrives just in time to interrupt. Maggie kicks Alice 2 off, and Nick runs her over with his car, but the vehicle crashes and catches fire. Maggie hurries to pull an unconscious Nick from the wreck, but he's unresponsive. In tears, she performs CPR, but it seems futile. Suddenly, the car moves, and a heavily burnt Alice 2 emerges, her voice echoing through nearby speakers. She climbs onto Maggie and begins choking her while pulling a sharp piece of metal from her body. Just as Alice 2 is about to stab Maggie, Nick strikes her with a car bumper. Alice 2 drops the metal to defend herself, and Maggie seizes the opportunity to grab it and stab Alice 2 in the face. This finally shuts her down. As Alice 2 collapses, the other frozen Sims begin to reactivate. The couple embraces amidst the chaos, relieved to be alive. Meanwhile, the Sim company investigates the repair shop. When power is restored, the broken code flashes on the screens. The lead inspector decides to destroy everything, but at that moment, his Sim assistants freeze, and the computer announces another upload. In the background, a new Alice model opens her eyes. And here's the end. If you enjoyed this recap and want to stay updated with all our future content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss any recap from us.